Do you want to support super healthy hip development when it comes to your newborn baby and all the way for the rest of their lives? Here are 2 different things that can potentially cause hip dysplasia and to be very aware of it. So let's go ahead and dig in. I am Adriana. I'm a pediatric occupational therapist of 13 years, and I have 2 little ones under 3. I am a feeding specialist and I work in the NICU as well too. First thing in this video is, what is hip dysplasia? Who is much more prevalent to have hip dysplasia, and what happens or how can we prevent this? And number 3, there are 2 things that we do as parents that can potentially cause hip dysplasia in our little ones, and to be very aware of it. So these are 3 different topics that I'll be discussing in this video, so stay tuned. Hip dysplasia is basically when the femur or the long bone is not very well aligned to the pelvis of the baby. And this typically happens before the age of 6 months. Now, why prior to 6 months? Because the baby's bones are not fully developed and it's more so cartilage. And since it's more so bones and cartilage, it's super soft, so it's very mobile. And when we are in particular positions for long periods of time, babies are more prone under the age of 6 months to have hip dysplasia, or more so the development of the misalignment of the femur and the pelvis, which can later on affect them in crawling and especially with walking as well too. So these are very important things to really consider. Now, who's more at risk when it comes to hip dysplasia? Per the International Hip Dysplasia Institute, as mentioned in their website, females are a lot more prone to have hip dysplasia, babies who are breached or born breached. If there is also a history of hip dysplasia within the family, because it can also be hereditary, if the baby was very large, especially during birth, and if the mother went through a really prolonged birth. Now, there is already congenital hip dysplasia, so babies that are born with hip dysplasia because of either being breached or having that history of hip dysplasia. Now, before I get into 2 different ways that could potentially cause hip dysplasia developmentally, I do need to discuss in terms of, well, babies are born with hip dysplasia. So it's called congenital hip dysplasia, basically babies that are born with it. Later on, I will also discuss what are the treatments more than anything, but I will discuss mainly what can potentially cause hip dysplasia developmentally before 6 months of age. Now, number 1, what can potentially cause it is swaddling. I know swaddling seems such an easy thing to do, right? When it comes to swaddling a baby, especially when you want to swaddle them nice and tight, so they're not snuggling out of it, so they're not waking up at night or during their nap time. It's very important to know how to swaddle the baby, and making sure when you do swaddle the baby that you're not swaddling tightly the legs straight down and causing the legs not to move. It's very important to swaddle the upper body. So when it comes to sleep sacks, those are very appropriate. Those are great. Even the International Hip Dysplasia has sleep sacks that they do recommend. So I would have you guys check out that particular website so you could look at swaddlers that they do recommend. So sleep sacks are great because the lower end of the body of the baby is completely open, it's very loose, and the baby is able to move around. Now, the second thing that can potentially cause hip dysplasia is baby wearing. Believe it or not, baby wearing is amazing. There's so many good positive benefits to it, but we need to understand that positioning is very important, especially to prevent hip dysplasia. So the M shape is very important because we want those knees above the hips and to be nice and wide and open when we're baby wearing. And the hips are not only very important to look at, but also the alignment of the spine, making sure that that spine is nice and round, especially when the baby is a newborn. And when that spine is nice and round and the hips are nice and aligned in that M shape, and the femur is a lot more closer to that socket, nice and aligned to the socket, then that is an ideal positioning when it comes to baby wearing. And another thing too is not wearing the baby outward facing, making sure that the baby is inward facing. So there are many parents that can mistakenly think that the baby wants to see the outward world when it comes to outward facing, but it's very important for us to know that prior to 6 months of age, we want that baby to be inward facing. Even the International Hip Dysplasia mentions too that if you can wear that baby inward facing all the way up to the age of 1, that's even more ideal in order for us to really make sure that those hips are nice and aligned. One thing too, then this is my own experience when it comes to hip dysplasia in general. It's my baby as well too, because my baby has an extra skin fold. So this is another thing to look for and to discuss with your pediatrician, because I, as a therapist, know these things when it comes to looking at alignment, looking at the baby's legs, looking at, does the baby have a little bit longer leg or an extra skin fold? But as a new parent, I totally understand, because you don't know about these types of things. So that's why I wanted to create this particular video. Not only those 2 other things that I've mentioned that could potentially cause hip dysplasia, there's other things that even the International Hip Dysplasia doesn't even know where hip dysplasia potentially comes from. But it's also very important for you to be very aware of your baby's skin folds. So if your baby has a little bit of an extra skin fold, especially in the buttock area, double check and see and talk to your pediatrician and see if you guys need physical therapy or if you need an x-ray or an ultrasound or anything like that, just to make sure that we are crossing our T's and dotting our I's and making sure that it's not hip dysplasia overall. One other thing is that every pediatrician checks your baby too to see if there's any clicks or any issues when it comes to the hips overall, which is probably why you see the pediatricians end up moving their legs more in that inward position, because they're checking for that. So if there are any like hip clicks or anything like that, you could always ask the pediatrician as well too, if they are concerned about anything that relates to that. So again, those are the 2 things, that the hip clicks and the extra skin folds, that you can discuss to your pediatrician if you are suspecting that hip dysplasia as well too. So hopefully this video gives you a little bit more information when it comes to hip dysplasia, how to prevent hip dysplasia, what is hip dysplasia. So please share and like, and also subscribe to my channel as well too if you are really enjoying my content. So go ahead and leave any comments or any questions or any concerns if you have any issues. So let me know. All right, thanks. Have a good day. Bye-bye.